Good morning, 7th grade. Happy Friday. It's me, Mr. Higgins, with your last lesson in the month of May. It's not the last lesson. Chill out. It's the last lesson for this month, though, because when we come back on Monday, it's already going to be June. Yep, that's what this year's like. Okay, here we go. You can see the focus question hasn't changed because we are still on our first section of studying terrorism, which is building our knowledge on September 11th, that tragic event in U.S. history, which kind of marks the beginning of the United States relationship with terrorism. That's not to say there wasn't terrorism before September 11th, because there was, but it's probably the biggest example that really caused our government to change, and it caused our culture to change as well. Today we're going to be unpacking that definition of terrorism. You know, what makes an act of terrorism versus just a regular crime or a horrible action. And let's get started with a few announcements first, though. Walkathon yesterday was awesome. I walked with the teachers and I tried to get on my phone. I was on for a little while. I couldn't see too many people because I don't know how to use Zoom on my phone. I barely know how to use it on the computer. But I did see Matthew, and I did see Ava, and if I missed anybody else, I apologize. I saw Ava in real life, IRL, cheering us on, which was kind of nice. There's a game meet today at 1 o'clock. It is a special game meet. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah, that's all I'm saying. Game meet, 1 o'clock today. Special game meet. Tune in. You should seriously tune in. Even if you don't normally tune in, because I think it'll make you happy. Power School updates today. I'm going to try to get some Power School updates today, but now that I have this special game day going on, they might not happen until tomorrow or the next day. So my apologies. Let's get into today's lesson. Oh, wait, hold on. Slow down, Higgins. Look at that picture of Rory. I may have shown this to you before because this is like one of my all-time favorite pictures. Last year, we took the boys up to the Great Lakes, Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, for a family reunion for my husband, and that is a picture that we took of Rory in a state park in New York. Oh, one of my favorites. You can see why. Look at that. Oh, okay. All right, now one more time. Oh, it's so good. All right, lesson. Today, what we're going to be doing, our task is, I'm going to give you different scenarios, and I want you to read over the scenario, and then you're going to decide if what happened in that scenario should be classified as terrorism, or if it's just a regular crime or a tragic event, okay? So what I'm trying to do in this is test your definition, your ability to apply this definition of terrorism. Do you really know what terrorism is? The definition of terrorism, which can be found on the reading that I gave you earlier this week called Terrorism Part 1, contains three important facts, three important characteristics, for lack of a better word. First and foremost, in an act of terrorism, civilians are physically or emotionally harmed by the action. Now, physical harm is easy to define, you know, like you end up in a hospital, the Boston Marathon bombing, people lost limbs, people lost their lives. That's being physically harmed. The emotional harm is a little bit more difficult to define. This is people who witnessed or were there, and they didn't have any physical injuries. They didn't break an arm and have to go to the hospital like that, but they're emotionally scarred. They're traumatized. It might be hard for them to sleep at night. It might be hard for them to do their work because they're on edge all the time. They're anxious. They're always thinking about this horrible event that they witnessed. And if people are harmed in that way, that still counts as terrorism, even if they don't have a physical injury. Second characteristic of terrorism is that this action, whatever it was, has to spread fear among the large group of people. I mean, you can hear that word fear, right? Terror in terrorism, it's the root word. And it's an important part of terrorism. Terrorists carry out these acts because they want to spread fear. They want to make a lot of people afraid, and they want to disrupt society through that fear. If only one person is afraid, I don't know if we call it an act of terrorism, but if it's a relatively large group of people, then it might be considered an act of terrorism. Last and most important, last and certainly not least, is your motivation. Acts of terrorism are carried out by people for a very important reason. They carry out acts of terrorism to bring attention to either political, social, or economic issues that affect large number of people. Terrorists don't commit acts of terrorism for personal reasons. You stole, oh, I don't want to use that example. I don't want to use that example either. It's got to be something like a national issue, like a political issue would be, I don't like a law, or I don't like something the government's doing. A social issue is not about an interpersonal relationship. It's about society. So like, I don't like how women are being treated. I don't like this religion. That would be a social issue. And an economic issue is obviously issues about the economy. Like, I don't like how you're using your natural resources. I don't like the discrepancy between the wealthy and the poor. So it's got to be a really big issue that the terrorists are trying to bring attention to. And when the news starts covering this act of terrorism, usually they cover why the terrorists did it, and it brings attention to their issue. But it's got to be an important political, social, or economic issue that affects large numbers of people, not just some personal beef between two people. That really wouldn't be terrorism. Now, in order for something to be an act of terrorism, it needs to meet all three of these. It needs to affect civilians physically or emotionally. They need to be harmed in one of those two ways or both. The action needs to spread fear amongst a large group of people, and the motivation must be about a political, economic, or social issue that affects a lot of people. Let's try to apply this definition to a situation. Ready? The bike thief. Tommy and Joey live in a huge neighborhood. There's a lot of people living there. Tommy steals, look at Tommy steal Joey's bike. That's great, great, a typo. Tommy steals Joey's bike because the two boys had an argument earlier in the week. Joey had been calling Tom names and spreading rumors about him at school. So Tom steals it and sells Joey's bike for $300 on eBay. And I love this clip art. Like, seriously, if you type in bike thief into Google clip art, this is what you get. I love it. Now, let's go through and see if this should be considered an act of terrorism. First characteristic is that civilians are physically or emotionally harmed by the action. Now, did this result in somebody being physically or emotionally harmed? I would say yes. I think it's open to interpretation, but I would say yes. There was no physical harm, but I bet you Joey was emotionally harmed because he lost his bike, and that's got to feel really bad. Like, if someone stole my car, I'd be really emotionally upset about it. So yes, it meets one of the three characteristics so far, but remember, it's got to meet all three. Let's look at the second one. The action needs to spread fear amongst a group of people. Does this scenario illustrate that characteristic? I'd say, yeah, okay, sure, I'll give it to you. He lives in a big neighborhood, and it's very possible, like, I know that, like, when there are car thefts in my neighborhood, it makes me anxious at night. Like, I make sure that my car is locked. So I'm guessing that people might be afraid that their bikes are going to get stolen. So yes, it meets two of the characteristics. Let's look at the third one. The action is carried out to bring attention to an important political, social, or economic issue. No, that is not why this was done. Now, you might argue that Tommy and Joey's fight was a social issue, but it's not. Remember, social issues are these big issues that affect people on a national level, like issues about religion or equal rights, not about Joey and Tommy calling each other names at school. That would not be a social issue affecting the nation. And since Tom stole the bike for a personal reason to get revenge on Joey, this is not an act of terrorism because it only meets two of the three characteristics. It must meet all three. Now, what I did today, guys, was in Google Classroom, I also posted another scenario like this one, only it's one that results in yes, it is an act of terrorism. It's a model response. It shows you how to write up your answers, and this is the kind of work that you're going to be doing. Now, typically, I have my students do 4 of these. Because we're doing this distance learning, I've cut it down to 2. So your work for today is as follows. This is a terrorism assignment, which can be found under today's Google Classroom. We posted at 9 a.m. It's due on Monday. So you have today, you have the weekend, you have all day Monday. It's not due till midnight. The fact check on terrorism part 1 is due today if you haven't done it. Guys, it's really easy. It's like 6 one-word answers. Maybe a little bit more than that, but not much. So get that done. That's an easy few points. Virtual map quiz today is post-quiz day, so take that stands quiz one last time and submit your post-quiz scores to me, please. And of course, as always, missing work revisions, you're always welcome to do those things. Guys, I hope you're having a great day. I hope you had fun at the walkathon yesterday. And I hope that I get to see a bunch of you at today's Google Meet. Again, that's 1 o'clock game meet. See you then.